Some time ago, I played the first scenario, the introductory scenario for Kingdom of Heaven. And, well, since I was in the middle of EU, I didn't get around to playing more of them. I just wanted to get some taste out there for people because it was a relatively new game. I was very excited about it. And I've got a very good impression. I've played since that first look, I've played that first scenario again. But now I'm going to look into the other, 8 scenarios that are in the game. And that's one of the really kind of key points to me about this in terms of CDGs. This is the only one I can recall that comes with a whole fistful of different scenarios. And anyway, this second scenario is, interestingly enough, the Second Crusade. Second Crusade doesn't get a lot of press. And let's take a look. What we've got is a situation where the Emperor of the Byzantines has just died, and Zengi is about ready to launch some attacks on the Crusaders. And one thing you note right away is just how fragile the Crusader state looks. It's this states look. It's this tiny little coastal area. You know, when you're playing on something, I don't know, like Empires of the Middle Ages, or when you're playing a game that treats the Crusade areas just as sort of, it makes them appear to be much larger in that game and in some others. And when you think about, say, how big the space looks on the EU map or whatever, you don't quite realize how little area the Crusaders really established themselves in. Now, it was almost, beyond belief what they managed in the First Crusade. Anyway, here, we don't start off with the Second Crusade right away. What we start off with is the Seljuks, who are going to be back here to about here, are going to launch an attack. And Damascus is a neutral power at the beginning of the game, as are, there's pro-Christian powers of the Byzantines and Armenia, which doesn't mean a lot because they don't have troops. Of course, maybe they do. I haven't looked at the cards for this scenario. Remember, this game handles things by giving each scenario its own special extra event cards with ops on them that are added to the deck. And that's sort of the way of handling these multi-scenario factors. Now over here, we have the Fatimids, again a neutral power, which could provide a problem for the Crusaders. Now, unlike the first game, which was only 3 turns, this one's going to take 6 turns, which, still sounds like you could do it in an evening. There's some special rules. On the 4th turn, you get this whole pile of Crusaders. They're going to come in if the Muslims are doing well enough. If they're not, the Crusaders win automatically at that point. And they'll show up in Constantinople. They have specific rules for crossing Asia Minor, and I may have misrepresented this rule when I explained them before. It's an extra attrition roll when you cross. Well, they have that, but here they're going to get 2 of those, which is more painful because historically this was very, very bad this particular time. Now, at the end of the game, the Christians need to have 25 or more victory points to win. The Muslims need 9 or more to win, assuming the Christians don't get that. And the Christians are going to start with 24 victory points in territories, and the Muslims start with 3. And that should reflect what's on the board. The 3 for the Muslims, for example, is Aleppo. They don't own any of this other stuff, although if those powers come into play, they will. Now, let's see what the Muslim player needs 6 or more victory points to trigger the crusade. And that'll indicate the fall of either a fairly major city. I mean, there aren't many things that are worth less than 2 points. Tripoli is only 2 points and is only a castle. You'll also see, kind of interesting, we have the Crack the Chevaliers here finally. It's no better than, well, it's a little better than other fortresses because it is a Hospitaller fortress, but when the Hospitallers capture territory there, or the Templars, once they're in the game, they're able to get these other good fortresses with an extra point on them added to them. And let's see if we got anything else of interest here. Okay, one thing that's going to be different from the other game that we played, the First Crusade, and I think they all are except for that one, is we've got these diplomatic actions. The other one had something triggered by a card for the Fatimids, but here we're going to actually use the diplomacy rules, which, remember, require a card play to take effect, and you're going to try to move, say, a neutral, or possibly someone in the opposing camp, one space in the other direction. And you've got these base values, so Damascus is easily moved. It requires only a 3 or less than a 3, I'm not sure which, I have to look that up, to engage them on your side. So there's a chance of getting them on the Christian side. Now, historically, from what I understand, the Damascenes were actually leaning towards the Christians, but there's no mechanism for that in the game. What there is they're either neutral or they're not, and if they have 3 on each side, they're about equally balanced and fairly easily to activate. The Christians historically attacked them, breaking a peace. The Fatimid, unlikely to come into the game, and then with the Armenians and Byzantium, well, they're involved. They're not terribly valuable without some card play coming into play, if there's something that'll give them troops or whatever, because they simply don't have any additional troops. You'll see there's additional troops for the Fatimids and Damascus if they come into play. Also, as is often the case, the Seljuks have a pile of troops in their force pool, so they're not fully mobilized. The Christians, of course, always hanging on by a thread, have their entire army on the board, so this is the best they're going to be. Well, they only need one more victory point to win, right? Yeah, but they got to hold on till the end of the game with those. All right, let's get started. I have to put the construct the decks, or deck, and deal out some cards. And the rules are a little fuzzy in my head. I tried looking them over again. I remember they were easier dealing with this once you actually get playing. So I'll probably make some mistakes, but what the hell. Well, things opened up historically, sort of, with Zengi charging up to attack Edessa, but Jocelyn II intercepted him, ended up outrolling him slightly, enough to even the losses. Nobody had any combat cards, and Zengi is driven back without a victory. For the Crusaders' turn, they play a very powerful card, Crusaders Arrive. Brings in 3/3-1-4 Crusader leader. I'm sorry, a 3/1-4 Crusader leader who's able to command a combined stack, and he's now the chief leader of the Christian forces as a whole. Before that, we had this guy down here, Manassas. I don't know anything about him. This is just essentially an unnamed leader, but you take one. And he's got 3 Crusaders with him. So now there's actually a powerful enough force that the Crusaders can go on the offensive. That's kind of a scary turn of events, especially with the partial defeat at Edessa. Well, Zengi here took some mercenaries, card which allowed him, to pull some extra troops into play. The Crusaders split up with Raymond II of Tripoli, and then Zengi went to Edessa. The Edessan forces withdrew into the city, and at that point, Zengi made a call for surrender. He only had a 1 in 6 chance of success. It failed. That marker's in place now, and now begins the kind of painful siege operations, which is going to hurt because the Crusaders have a fairly large force available right now. Now here's the problem. They don't have the cards to move the Crusader army, and their secondary leader could in fact move with Raymond and combine to create a force going for Aleppo perhaps. But that's going to take some logistical costs with the cards, which might make the siege easier on, if you start losing cards that are useful in defense there. So it's kind of a tricky situation. We're not seeing any diplomacy yet, although the cards that allow that are kind of rare. This one would have allowed it with the 0 on it, and that would have been a 50-50 chance of grabbing Damascus, say, for the Seljuk allies. The Crusaders also dropped their own siege into place here at Aleppo. Also a resistance factor of 6. Those are tough to beat. They didn't make a roll, a call to surrender. They had no chance. And then our good friend with the Seljuks played a diplomacy card with a -1 and got Damascus on his side. And that's going to cause some real problems because, as we can see, Tripoli's been denuded of forces in order to make this siege of Aleppo. Now Damascus can move in and maybe take advantage of that. They have an expensive leader, so that's a problem. You don't have a lot of mobility in this game when you have those big leaders as your only leaders. A whole string of siege cards were played, triggered by the Crusaders at Aleppo. They opened up with lines of circumvallation, which they did not get a blockade from, and then that was countered by an attack, and they lost a strength point due to attrition in placing themselves there. They did not get well, anyway, with the blockade gone, then there was an attack from inside, which caused another casualty. They responded with ladders and mantlets, trying to reduce this. Here it's down to like 4 at this point, but then traitor in the enemy ranks increases it by 2. So we're back up to 6 points of resistance there. And, that's not going to fall this turn. The question is, can it last into next turn? We don't know. But right now it looks like this turn is just some jockeying taking place and nothing actually happening. Well, other than Damascus joining the war. But nobody's captured anything. Nobody's taken anything. And, well, there's no reason for a crusade to happen yet. Well, the actions are over, and we can see the siege numbers reduced a little bit, especially for the Crusaders. They got some lucky draws off the top of the deck doing the, let's see what the siege event is. What we did do, though, is the Seljuks used another diplomacy card, just a 0, and it only gave them a 1 in 6 chance for the Fatimids. But they got them, and now the Fatimids are in their camp, and, well, could be a serious problem. There weren't enough cards left to move them up even to Ascalon, and it doesn't do much. You want to start these things, you want to launch your attacks at the beginning when you have a lot of cards, although their leader is very, well, no, he's a 3-pointer. I thought he was a 1-pointer. I misread him. Yeah, so again, it's another big leader I can't really afford to move, but that's okay. And now the turn ends. We've demobilized all the forces, and you can see there's nothing left on the map, basically. They get to come back. It's just a mechanism for pulling them off the board if they're outside their area. What we don't have, though, is the Crusaders didn't have to worry about it because they only had a Crusader and a Hospitaller. Now, the leaders had to worry about it. I'm not sure if they both, one of them may be off the board, because they're not Crusader leaders. One of them may be missing from there. Over here, the Seljuk leader was able to get under his battle rating, so he kept half his forces, but half of them demobilized, so his stack's smaller. He's going to have to reinforce that force, or else it's at some risk. But otherwise, everything that's on the board is kind of allowed to be there. These are all Crusaders here. That I have to worry about. I'll check that in a moment. I'm going to load this one up, and then we'll move to turn 2.